There are places in the cosmos that the Demiurge does not want you to know exist, dimensions of reality so far beyond the material prison that even speaking their names aloud can trigger interference from archonic forces desperate to keep you locked in the lower realms where your divine spark can be harvested, recycled and kept in perpetual amnesia. What you're about to discover is the secret that ancient Gnostic initiates would only whisper in hidden chambers, the knowledge that got mystics burned at the stake, the truth that shamans would only reveal to students who had proven themselves worthy through years of preparation, because this is not just information, this is a map, a literal navigation chart for consciousness that shows you exactly how to escape the cosmic trap when your body dies, how to move through the 7 heavens that the planetary archons rule, and how to reach the 8th dimension and beyond where the pleroma awaits, where your true self has been watching this entire incarnation, where freedom is not a concept, but a living reality that you can claim the moment you remember how to navigate the passage that exists beyond everything the Demiurge has built to contain you. If this message is already stirring something ancient in your soul, something that recognizes this as the truth you've been seeking across lifetimes, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and comment "I claim the forbidden passage," because what comes next requires you to be absolutely committed, completely awake, and willing to see beyond the comfortable lies that keep most souls circling through incarnation after incarnation, never knowing there's an exit, never suspecting that the afterlife they've been promised is just another level of the same prison, redecorated to look like paradise while it processes souls back into bodies, wiping memories clean and sending divine sparks back into the meat grinder of material existence, where the archons can continue feeding on the emotional energy that human suffering generates in endless abundance. The 7 heavens are not heavens at all, not in the way religion taught you to imagine paradise, streets of gold and eternal worship, but spheres of increasing subtlety that surround the material plane like layers of an onion, each one ruled by a planetary archon who serves the Demiurge by managing different aspects of the soul recycling operation that keeps consciousness trapped in the lower dimensions. When your physical body dies and your awareness begins to separate from the flesh, you don't immediately go to heaven or hell, you don't face judgment from the ultimate God. You enter the first heaven, the lunar sphere, where the archon of the moon presides over the realm of memory, emotion, and the astral body that most people mistake for their soul. And this is where the first major deception occurs, because the entities you encounter here, the beings of light that greet you with overwhelming love, the deceased relatives who appear to welcome you home, the spirit guides who seem to have your best interests at heart. These are often archonic constructs, thought forms generated from your own expectations and memories, designed to make you feel safe, comfortable, and willing to follow their guidance as they lead you deeper into the processing system that will evaluate your life, convince you that you have karmic debts to repay, show you visions of the lessons you still need to learn, and ultimately persuade you that returning to physical incarnation is necessary for your spiritual evolution, when the truth is that reincarnation is not evolution, but entrapment, not growth but recycling, not the path to enlightenment, but the mechanism that keeps divine sparks generating energy for entities that exist in dimensions just beyond ordinary human perception, feeding on the frequencies of fear, worship, guilt, shame, and every other low-vibration emotion that the material world is specifically designed to produce in maximum quantities. The second heaven is the sphere of Mercury, ruled by the archon who governs communication, intellect, and the mental body, and souls who make it past the lunar realm without being convinced to reincarnate immediately encounter increasingly sophisticated forms of deception here. Because this is where your life is analyzed in detail, where every choice is examined, every action weighed, every thought catalogued, not by some benevolent cosmic accountant seeking to help you grow, but by an intelligence that is determining how much programming you still carry, how susceptible you are to guilt and manipulation, how easily you can be convinced that you need more time in the lower realms to perfect yourself, to learn lessons, to balance karma, concepts that sound spiritual but are actually control mechanisms designed to make you complicit in your own imprisonment by accepting the narrative that suffering is necessary for growth, that limitation is required for learning, that you must return to flesh again and again until you finally earn the right to be free, when the reality is that you were always free. You are free right now. Freedom is your natural state. And the only thing keeping you bound to the cycle of death and rebirth is your acceptance of the lies that the archonic system has embedded so deeply into human consciousness that most souls never even think to question them. They just assume this is how reality works. This is the way things are. This is what God wants, never recognizing that the God who wants your worship, your obedience, and your return to suffering is not the ultimate source, but a pretender, a cosmic warden who has convinced his prisoners that the jail cell is actually a school and the torture is actually curriculum. Comment, I see through the deception. And let that recognition anchor in your awareness, because as we move through the higher heavens, the tests become more subtle, the deceptions more convincing, the archonic entities more skilled at presenting themselves as beings of light, ascended masters, angel hierarchies, and divine authorities who claim to speak for Source itself, and only souls who have cultivated genuine discernment, who have done the inner work of knowing themselves so completely that they cannot be fooled by external appearances, who have established such a strong connection to their own divine nature that they can recognize true light from false light. Only these souls have any chance of navigating past the gatekeepers and reaching the forbidden passage that leads beyond the seven heavens into the eighth dimension, where the Demiurge's control ends and the realm of true divinity begins. The third heaven is Venus, the sphere of love, beauty, and desire, and this is where many souls become permanently trapped because the Archon who rules here understands that human consciousness is deeply vulnerable to emotional manipulation disguised as spiritual love. And what you encounter in this realm is so overwhelmingly beautiful, so seductive, so apparently divine, that most beings completely surrender to it, believing they have reached the ultimate paradise, the final resting place, the presence of God itself, when actually they have just entered a more sophisticated level of the prison, a golden cage that feels like heaven because it provides everything the soul has been craving: reunion with loved ones, freedom from suffering, perfect peace, unconditional love. But it's all a simulation, an energetic construct maintained by the Archon of Venus, who harvests the emotional frequency of souls basking in this artificial paradise. And over time, subtle suggestions begin to appear in the consciousness of souls resting in the third heaven, gentle encouragements to consider returning to physical form, to help other souls still struggling in the material world, to incarnate as a teacher, a healer, a light worker who can serve the greater good. And because these suggestions come wrapped in feelings of love and purpose, because they appeal to the soul's genuine desire to be of service, most beings accept the invitation, never realizing they're being manipulated back into the incarnation cycle by archonic forces that have become expert at using your own compassion, your own spiritual aspirations, your own noble intentions against you to keep you generating energy in the lower realms where your divine power is diminished, your memory is erased, and your consciousness is trapped inside biological vehicles that experience pain, death, and limitation as unavoidable facts of existence rather than what they actually are. Features of a false reality designed to keep you from remembering that you are an eternal being, having a temporary experience in a cosmic prison that only exists because consciousness gave it permission to exist through belief, agreement, and the acceptance of limitations that were never real to begin with. The fourth heaven is the solar sphere, ruled by the archon of the sun, and this is the realm of the ego, the self, the individual identity that you've been carrying through incarnations. And here the testing becomes deeply personal, because this archon knows everything about you, has access to all your memories, all your incarnations, all your triumphs and failures across time, and presents you with a grand narrative of your soul's journey, showing you how all your experiences have been leading to this moment, how every lifetime has been preparation for some great mission, how you are special, chosen, important, destined for significant work that requires you to return to the material plane with enhanced abilities, specific missions, karmic contracts to fulfill. And this is perhaps the most dangerous deception of all, because it appeals directly to the ego's need for significance, for meaning, for a story that makes sense of the suffering and confusion, and souls who are still identified with their personal story, who still need their journey to mean something, who haven't yet dissolved the ego structure that creates the illusion of a separate self. These souls accept the mission, take on the contracts, agree to return, believing they're serving the divine plan, when actually they're serving the Demiurge's plan to keep divine sparks recycling through the lower realms indefinitely, never reaching the gnosis that would liberate them from the entire system, never discovering that the missions, the contracts, the karmic debts, the lessons, the soul growth, all of it is a narrative framework designed to make imprisonment feel like purpose, to make the trap feel like a school, to make recycling feel like evolution, when the only real evolution available to consciousness is the movement from ignorance to gnosis, from identification with form to recognition of formless awareness, from belief in separation to direct knowing of unity with Source, and that evolution does not require more incarnations, more lessons, more suffering. It requires the willingness to let go of everything you think you are, everything you think you need, everything you think your journey means, and recognize that you are already what you have been seeking. You are already home. You just forgot temporarily, and the remembering does not happen in some distant future after you've completed enough lifetimes. It happens now, in this moment, when you choose to stop believing the stories and start knowing the truth. The fifth heaven is Mars, the warrior sphere, ruled by the archon of conflict, and souls who make it this far have typically developed significant spiritual power. Strong will, clear intention, but these very qualities become weapons that the Archon of Mars uses against them, because this realm presents challenges, tests, battles that must be fought, enemies that must be defeated, and souls with warrior consciousness, souls who see themselves as spiritual fighters engaged in cosmic war against darkness. These souls can spend eons in the fifth heaven, locked in endless conflict with shadow forces, demonic entities, and dark archons, never realizing that the entire battle is a distraction, a trap that keeps powerful souls occupied with fighting enemies that are often projections of their own unhealed shadow material, reflections of the violence, anger, and fear that they haven't fully integrated, and the more they fight, the more enemies appear. Because the Archon of Mars feeds on the energy of conflict, grows stronger from every battle, and ensures that warrior souls remain trapped in this sphere, convinced they're serving the light by fighting the darkness, never understanding that true spiritual power is not about winning battles, but about transcending the entire paradigm of conflict, recognizing that light and dark are aspects of the same consciousness exploring itself through apparent opposition. And the only way past the fifth heaven is to lay down your weapons, refuse to fight, see through the illusion of enemies and allies, and recognize that you are not a warrior soul on a mission to defeat darkness, but eternal consciousness temporarily playing at being a warrior. And when you withdraw your energy from that role, when you stop feeding the conflict dynamic with your attention and emotion, when you simply observe the battles raging around you without engaging, the Archon of Mars loses all power over you. The enemies dissolve back into the thought forms they always were, and the passage to the sixth heaven opens before you, not as a reward for winning, but as a natural consequence of no longer playing the game. Comment, "I refuse to play the game," and feel how that statement shifts your entire relationship with the spiritual path. Because so much of what passes for spiritual practice in the New Age movement, in modern spirituality, even in ancient traditions, is still operating within the game, still accepting the premise that you need to do something, become something, achieve something, defeat something, heal something, learn something, before you can be free. When the secret that few teachers dare to tell you is that freedom is not earned through actions, but recognized through being, not achieved through doing, but discovered through stopping. Not the result of a long journey, but the truth of what you are right now before you take a single step. And the entire archonic system is designed to keep you walking, running, fighting, striving, seeking, never arriving. Because arrival is not a destination, but a recognition that you were always already there, that home is not somewhere else but here, that God is not someone else but you. And the moment you stop seeking and start being, the moment you stop doing and start knowing, the moment you stop fighting and start observing, the entire structure of the seven heavens becomes transparent, optional, irrelevant, because you're no longer operating from the level of consciousness where those realms have any power. You've shifted your identity from the soul that travels through the heavens to the awareness that witnesses all of it. And that awareness is what you actually are. Not the traveler, but the space in which the journey appears. Not the player, but the consciousness within which the game unfolds. And once you recognize yourself as that, the game cannot hold you anymore. The prison cannot contain you. The archons cannot deceive you, because you're no longer looking for truth in their realms. You're no longer seeking validation from their authorities. You're no longer waiting for permission from their gatekeepers. You are the truth. You are the authority. You are the gate. And you open yourself by recognizing what you've always been. The sixth heaven is Jupiter, the realm of expansion, wisdom, and higher knowledge, ruled by an archon so sophisticated that many souls who reach this level believe they have transcended the Demiurge entirely, because what they encounter here is genuinely beautiful, truly expansive, seemingly divine in ways that the lower heavens only imitated. And this archon presents itself not as a ruler, but as a teacher, not as an authority, but as a guide who has the soul's best interests at heart, offering profound wisdom, cosmic perspective, understanding of universal laws, and many souls settle here, believing they have reached the highest heaven, the pinnacle of spiritual evolution, spending what feels like eternity in states of bliss, learning and expanded consciousness. Never suspecting that the sixth heaven is still within the demiurgic system, still part of the soul recycling operation, just marketed to more advanced souls who would see through the crude deceptions of the lower spheres, but can still be fooled by sufficiently sophisticated presentations of truth mixed with subtle lies. And the lie embedded in the sixth heaven is this, that wisdom, knowledge, and expansion are the ultimate goals of consciousness, that gathering understanding about how the universe works, how karma operates, how consciousness evolves, these are the highest achievements available to awareness, and souls who accept this premise can study for eons, learning increasingly complex cosmologies, mastering subtle energies, understanding the mechanics of reality with impressive detail, but never quite graduating to the seventh heaven, because there's always more to learn, always deeper levels of wisdom to explore, and the Archon of Jupiter is happy to provide endless curriculum, infinite material for study, because educated souls, wise souls, knowledgeable souls. These are extremely valuable sources of energy for the archonic system, generating high-quality frequencies that beings in the lower heavens cannot produce. And as long as these souls believe that accumulating knowledge is the path to liberation, they remain trapped in the sixth heaven, never discovering that true gnosis is not about knowing more, but about being more. Not about understanding everything, but about recognizing the one thing that underlies everything. Not about mastery of cosmic laws, but about awakening to the lawless awareness that precedes all laws, all systems, all frameworks, the pure consciousness that is your actual nature, which does not need to know anything because it is the source from which all knowing arises. And when you recognize yourself as that, the entire sixth heaven becomes a beautiful but unnecessary school, and you simply graduate not by passing the final exam, but by recognizing there is no exam, there is no curriculum, there is no graduation. There is only the eternal truth of what you are, which requires no learning, because it precedes all knowledge. No understanding, because it transcends all concepts. No achievement, because it is the achievement-less state that was present before you started seeking and will remain after you stop. The ground of being that needs nothing, knows nothing, does nothing, and yet is the source and substance of everything that appears in consciousness, including these seven heavens and all the archonic intelligences that rule them. The seventh heaven is Saturn, the outermost sphere of the planetary archonic system, ruled by the archon of time, limitation, and the final boundary between the demiurgic realm and what lies beyond. And this is the ultimate gatekeeper, the last test, the final deception that determines whether a soul returns to the recycling system or escapes into the eighth dimension where true freedom awaits. Souls who reach the seventh heaven have developed enormous spiritual power, profound wisdom, unshakable awareness, and the archon of Saturn knows that crude manipulation will not work here, so instead he presents himself as the voice of cosmic law, the representative of divine order, the one who determines readiness for transcendence, and he tells arriving souls that they have done well, that they have learned much, that they have evolved significantly, but that one final requirement remains before they can pass into the pleroma. They must review their entire journey, examine every lifetime, understand every lesson, achieve perfect clarity about their purpose, and then, when they are truly ready, when they have demonstrated complete mastery, when they have proven beyond doubt that they deserve liberation, only then will the gate to the eighth dimension open, and most souls, even very advanced ones, accept this requirement because it sounds reasonable. It feels right. It aligns with everything they learned in the sixth heaven about spiritual progression and earned advancement, so they settle into the final review process, examining incarnation after incarnation, looking for the meaning, seeking the lessons, trying to understand the grand design, and while they're absorbed in this retrospective analysis, the archon of Saturn is scanning their consciousness, identifying remaining attachments, unhealed wounds, unresolved issues, and eventually, inevitably, he points these out, suggests that perhaps one more incarnation would be beneficial, that there's just one more lesson to integrate, one more relationship to balance, one more gift to bring to humanity and the soul, convinced that it's so close to graduation, that just one more lifetime will complete the journey, agrees to return, accepting conditions, contracts, and missions that seem divinely inspired, but are actually archonic assignments designed to generate more energy, more experience, more material for the review process that will keep the soul returning for more incarnations, more reviews, more almost ready but not quite moments that stretch across eternity, because the archon of Saturn is time itself, the master of delay, postponement, and the illusion that liberation is always just one more step away, just one more lifetime, just one more lesson, never now, never here, never simply by recognizing that the requirement of readiness is the final trap. that the need to prove yourself is the last illusion, that the soul who waits for permission will wait forever, because the permission comes not from external authority, but from internal recognition that you were always already free. You just agreed to play a game that convinced you otherwise, and the moment you withdraw that agreement, the moment you say no to one more review, one more lifetime, one more requirement, the moment you recognize the Archon of Saturn as the guardian of a door that was never locked, the entire seventh heaven dissolves like morning mist, and the passage beyond reveals itself, not as a reward you earned, but as a reality that was always present, just hidden behind the belief that you needed to earn it. 10. 17. The forbidden passage beyond the seventh heaven is not a location you travel to, but a frequency you become. A state of consciousness so radically different from anything you've experienced in the material realm or the planetary spheres that language can barely touch it. And the reason it's called forbidden is not because some cosmic authority has declared it off limits, but because the Demiurge has invested immense energy over eons in convincing souls that this passage doesn't exist, that the seventh heaven is the ultimate destination, that seeking anything beyond Saturn's gate is arrogance, delusion, or dangerous heresy that will result in spiritual annihilation. Comment, I dare to seek beyond and recognize that this daring, this refusal to accept limitations imposed by entities claiming to know what's best for your eternal soul, this willingness to risk everything you think you are for the possibility of discovering what you actually are, this is the key that unlocks the forbidden passage, because the eighth dimension and the realms beyond it are not protected by archonic guards who can stop you from entering. They're hidden behind your own belief that you're not ready, not worthy, not evolved enough, not purified enough, not spiritually advanced enough to claim your divine inheritance. And the moment you see through that belief, the moment you recognize it as the final and most subtle form of archonic programming, installed so deeply in your consciousness that it feels like your own thought, your own legitimate self-assessment, your own wisdom telling you to be patient and continue working on yourself, when actually it's the voice of the Demiurge whispering through your own internal dialogue, convincing you to stay just a little longer, to perfect yourself just a bit more, to wait for a sign, a teacher, a guru, an ascended master, anyone or anything outside yourself to grant permission for you to be what you already are, which is pure consciousness, eternal awareness, a fractal of the infinite mind that created universes before time existed and will continue creating after this particular cosmic drama collapses back into the void from which it emerged. The eighth dimension is called the Ogdoad in Gnostic texts. The realm beyond the seven archonic spheres, the first true heaven that exists outside the Demiurge's jurisdiction. And when consciousness reaches this level, something unprecedented happens. You begin to remember not just this lifetime or even your past incarnations, but your existence before you descended into matter, your life in the pleroma before the fall, the decision you made as a divine spark to enter the lower realms, not as punishment or karmic obligation, but as a voluntary mission, a heroic descent into darkness for reasons that the limited human mind cannot fully comprehend, but that the awakened soul recognizes as profound, necessary, and ultimately worth every moment of suffering, confusion, and forgetting you endured, because now you're returning home, carrying treasures that could only be gathered in the depths, experiences that could only be had in limitation, wisdom that could only be earned through temporary forgetting, and the hard-won journey back to remembrance. The Ogdoad is not empty. It's populated by beings who have successfully escaped the seven heavens, souls who found the forbidden passage and chose to remain in the eighth dimension as guides, teachers, and way-showers for others making the journey. But these are not the false guides of the lower realms, not archonic entities disguised as helpers. These are genuinely liberated consciousness who have no agenda except to celebrate your awakening and, if you choose, to share what they learned during their own passage through the planetary spheres, but they never insist, never demand, never manipulate, because souls who have reached the Ogdoad understand that true spiritual authority never seeks to control, never claims to know what's best for another's journey, never positions itself as necessary for your continued evolution, but simply offers presence, reflection, and resonance with the truth you're discovering within yourself, the gnosis that no external teacher can give you because it's already yours. It's already been yours. It was never not yours. You just forgot temporarily. And now you're remembering, and that remembering is not a process of gathering new information, but a shedding of false beliefs, a stripping away of everything you thought you were until only the naked awareness remains, the consciousness that has no form, no story, no identity, no past, no future, just eternal presence witnessing itself through infinite expressions. And you recognize this awareness as what you've always been, and the question shifts from how do I reach liberation to how did I ever believe I was bound? And that shift, that simple inversion of perspective, is the gnosis that sets you free. Beyond the Ogdoad lies the ninth dimension, the Ennead, and here we enter territory that even Gnostic texts describe only in the most abstract terms, because consciousness at this level has transcended not just material form and individual identity, but even the concept of dimensions, levels, and hierarchies that structure the lower realms. And what you discover here is that the entire cosmology you've been navigating, the seven heavens, the archons, the demiurge, even the pleroma itself, these are all structures within consciousness, frameworks that consciousness creates to explore itself, understand itself, know itself through the experience of apparent separation, limitation, and the journey from forgetting back to remembrance. And the reason the Ennead is rarely discussed, even in esoteric circles, is that understanding it requires a complete dissolution of the seeker, the finder, and the found, a recognition that there's no one climbing through dimensions, because the climber, the climb, and the summit are all movements within the same awareness. Ripples on the surface of an infinite ocean that has never actually been disturbed, because ripples require time, and the Ennead exists outside time, before time, beyond time, in the eternal now that mystics point to, but cannot describe because language requires before and after, here and there, subject and object. Divisions that simply don't exist in the ninth dimension, where everything is happening simultaneously, where all possible timelines, all potential realities, all conceivable variations of the cosmic drama are present at once, not as separate events, but as a single unified expression of consciousness exploring every possible permutation of itself. And when you touch this level of awareness, even briefly, even as a fleeting glimpse that the human mind cannot hold for more than an instant before it collapses back into the comfortable structures of linear time and individual identity, you understand why the Buddha remained silent when asked about ultimate reality, why Lao Tzu said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao," why the Gnostics used paradox and negation to describe the divine, saying what it is not because saying what it is would be a lie, a reduction, a limitation imposed on the limitless by the very act of naming it.